Hey, so in this video, we will finally be putting it all together and connecting the data, the domain with the provider. So this is the fun part. We're going to create our provider inside of the provider folder right here. All we're going to do is just open this folder, create a new file, and then we're going to call it, let's go invite friends underscore provider dart. Awesome. Okay, so what is this gonna do, right? What is this file for? The provider is the brain of the operations. It's the only place that holds the state, updates the state. It calls the repository, handles the loading, success, the outcomes, and we can do this through a state notifier. State notifier is from Riverpod, and it's a Riverpod class that you extend. Pretty much it holds the current state and notifies every watching screen when the state changes. So we use a state notifier to help us do this and keep track of these little changes that are made on the screens and need to be refreshed with the current and new data the user entered. Some things to remember. Let me see if I have anything from my notes. Always handle outcomes. Okay, so pretty much, I think we're ready to implement the provider. And I'll talk about it as we implement it as well. Just to show you how it connects the data and the domain. Together inside this provider file. So let's import some stuff. We'll start off with the imports, right? And in the import, our first import we're gonna want to import is Flutter Riverpod. Not all the stuff that they gave us. So we're gonna want to import Flutter Riverpod. Then we're gonna want to import our repository, our mock invite, and then our states, which was the class we made. Let me check these imports. They look pretty good, actually. Yes, that's what we want to import. Let me just remove this code here. So what did we just import over here, right? We imported our invite friends states dart. We imported our invite repository, and then we imported our mock invite repository. These are all things that we're going to be using once we, write these files. So let's start off by just writing our class. And as I mentioned before, right, we're going to be using a notifier, right? A state notifier. This is really important for providers. So let's write our class. So our class is going to be class invite friends. Let's invite. We're gonna call this invite friends notifier. Notifier, which very important, extends the state notifier class provided to us by Riverpod, but we're going to extend the invite friends state. Remember, the invite friends state is from the domain, right? This is very important because this is how we have access to those is loading those data fields that we wrote inside of the domain. So this is what gives us that access. And then here we're just going to do some we're going to import the repository. So the final repository, we're going to import it right here. Invite repository. And then we'll just call it repository. Yeah, that looks good to me. And then this is a constructor that we need to use. So I'll add that here. It's just a standard constructor that we always need to use. This repository is super constructor. So just make sure you always add this constructor as well. That's how it looks. I'm having some errors over here. I wonder if it's because the imports are wrong. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and if I do command period, it will tell me what import it is that I need for that. Okay. Then if I click on this one and do command period, tell me the import I need. And then, yeah, everything looks pretty good so far. So what do we have so far? We have our constructor over here. We have our class we just made. Now is time for us to go ahead and write our provider method, right? The method that does what this send invite button should do. This method is really important that we write it in the provider because we wanted to check the data layer, right? We wanted to check the data layer and wait 3 seconds. That's where we have our repository. And once it's done waiting 3 seconds, we want to know if the email was successfully sent by updating and letting us know if the email was sent. That logic is going to be written inside the provider because the provider can see both the domain and the data and is the brain that connects the two. So let's write our send invite method. Before we write this method, let's just kind of understand what we want to do in this method. We want to tell the screen, right? We want to tell, first of all, we want to tell the screen we are loading once they click that button. Then once they're done clicking that button, we want to call the repository. We want to call the repository to send an invite. And then once we're done with that, we want to tell the screen to update us if we were successful or not, pretty much. Okay. And yeah, let's start to write the method. Pretty much we're going to use a future void method again, make it asynchronous. I have to check all this. I'm not sure if it's going to be right. We have to make it asynchronous. And the first thing we're doing is we're calling that send invite method that we had written in our repository. So we're just going to call a method that pretty much does the same thing. But step one we want to do is we just want to create and say that the state, right, is equal to state dot copy with. And what this does for us, it tells us that when we press this button, the first thing we should do is we should go to is loading, right? Because once I want to click this button, it needs to load, right? And when it's loading, I want to see a spinner. That spinner is going to be spinning while that network call is happening. So we're going to pretty much turn the state of is loading to true, right? So that's what we'll do first, which is the first comment we wanted to successfully complete. Then the second thing we want to do is we just want to go ahead and call the repository, right? So this code completion is actually pretty good. So we want to call the repository to send the invite, and we're just going to call await and call that send invite method. And what that's going to do is just wait 3 seconds, which is simulating that network call. But if we had Firebase hooked up when we call that send invite, right, what's going to happen is it's actually going to trigger Firebase with the Firebase method inside of it to send an invite. Then once we're done sending an invite, we just want to tell the screen if we're successful or not. How do we do that? We have to now update the state, right? And then the state we're going to use copy with. So that's why that copy with method was very important for us to write, right? And we're going to use copy with to update it with the new states, right? From this method. Just a second, copy with, and then, we're going to have is loading now is false because we're done loading. then invite sent, which was one of the data fields, we're going to set that to true, because we have successfully sent an invite, because right now we didn't add like anything for the error message. So pretty much we're just updating the data fields. Now there was a success message data field as well, and we're just going to update that with a string that says, I think the variable was lowercase. Yeah, success message. Yeah, that says invite successfully sent, pretty much. These are the states we want to update from the data fields when we call this method. I really hope this makes sense. So pretty much we're wiring the data and the domain together. And the state notifier is helping us by calling that state class. And then here we're doing like some data injection, by calling that, repository, so we can have access to that method, which we call right here, which is that send invite method, which, simulates a network call. Then once we're done with this, super important part right here. This is really, really, really important what we're going to do right now. Right now, what we're going to do is create a variable, and that variable we're going to create is going to hold this class for us. Okay. And we can switch out this class for a Firebase. So we're using mock right now, but we can use Firebase for this when we need to. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a provider so that when we go to the screen, because right now the last step now is to go to the screen and add this functionality. But the provider, we need to create a variable so that the screen just calls the provider. And once we call the provider, we'll have access to all the methods inside the provider that we created. So our first method is send invite. So when we go to update the screen to update it to a consumer widget, right, it's going to listen, right? RiverPod is going to listen and look for provider. And if a provider gives us some detail with some updates, then since it's a now consumer stateful widget, it can use the provider to update those states on the screen. So I'm going to write that for us, and we'll pretty much just see how that is supposed to look. Okay. But this is pretty much going to be the invite friends provider. And right here, we're just going to make it final, and we're going to call it invite friends provider provider. Now that's our variable, and then inside our variable, we're just going to store the class that we've created right now. And if you look at this code right here, this code is pretty much having our state notifier. Yes, that's correct. Which is a class we wrote with the state listening and watching the mock repository. I think I'm having an error here, right here, because I did not import it. Okay, so everything we need, the repository is imported, the mock repository is imported, and the invite repository is imported. Very important point here. Right now, we're using the test repository. But once we update Firebase, and we add Firebase, we can then change this to have Firebase, because right now we're testing locally for functionality. But this part is a line you change when you want to update it for Firebase, and that's all you do. You keep the providers, the methods the same, but you just now use real data. So, update with Firebase later. Yeah. And we're done writing our provider. This is pretty much it for this screen. The get started method, we would not need to write here because it's just a simple routing. So we wouldn't need to write that over here. But yeah, this is how you connect the provider to the data and the domain. I hope this video was helpful. The last video we're going to do is just wire this together. We're going to change the stateless screen that the front end gave us, because we're now done setting up the provider. We're just going to go to presentation. We're going to go ahead and change this stateless screen to become a consumer stateful widget. We'll import our river pod and our provider. And then, yeah, we'll just update so that, as you can see here, they have an on pressed, but it does nothing when I press this button. What we'll do is just update this method to call send invite, and that will complete all that stuff the provider did for us. But yeah, we'll do that in the next video. So see you guys in the next video.